You know, a lot of people believe falling means you failed. They think if you slipped, if you stumbled, if you messed up, somehow that's the end of your story. But hear me on this. It's not the fall that defines you, it's what you do afterward. Falling is part of being human. Quitting is the only thing that cements the fall as failure. Every strong woman you admire, every testimony that inspires you, every victory you've ever seen, behind it was a fall that could have broken them. But they got back up, and that's where God steps in. See, you don't rise because you never fell. You rise because you chose not to stay down. That's the difference. The enemy would love for you to believe that falling means you're weak. But God says falling just proves you're human, and rising again proves you're faithful. Don't miss that. It's not the perfection of your journey that matters. It's the persistence of your faith. Think about it. When a child is learning to walk, they fall over and over again, and not once does a parent look at that child and say, "You failed." No, the parent smiles, encourages, lifts them up, and says, "Try again." And every fall is simply part of the process of learning how to stand stronger. That's how God looks at you. He's not pointing fingers at your mistakes. He's extending his hand, saying, "Daughter, rise. I'm not done with you yet." And here's the truth. Sometimes your fall isn't even because you did something wrong. Sometimes life just knocks you flat. A betrayal you never saw coming, a door slammed in your face, a loss so heavy you can hardly breathe. Those moments can make you believe it's safer to stay down, safer not to hope, safer not to try again. But safety and purpose don't live in the same place. You weren't created to live on the ground. You were created to rise. The power of God in your life is not shown when everything is going perfectly. It's revealed when everything has fallen apart and you still choose to get up. That's where real strength is born. That's where people around you look and say, "I don't know how she's still standing." But you know. You know it's not your strength, it's his, because the moment you rise with him, your fall becomes your testimony. Some of you are carrying labels that came from a fall: divorced, broken, rejected, not enough. And the enemy whispers, "See, that's who you are." But listen closely. That is not who you are. That was just a moment in your story. That was just a chapter. And chapters don't define the ending. Rising means refusing to wear the label of your lowest moment and instead declaring, "I am who God says I am. I am chosen. I am loved. I am his." Every fall has a choice built into it. You can let it bury you, or you can let it teach you. You can let it silence you, or you can let it give you a new voice. Falling shows the world your humanity. Rising shows the world God's glory. That's why the fall is not the focus. It's the rising that carries the power. So if you've fallen, don't let shame convince you it's over. Don't let fear convince you to stay down. Your fall is not your finish line. It's simply the ground you'll push off from as you rise higher than before, because the truth is, falling doesn't define you. Quitting does. Sometimes life will bring you to your knees, and you'll feel like you've got nothing left to give. You've tried everything, you've pushed as hard as you can, and still the weight knocks you flat. And in that moment, it's easy to think you've reached the end. It's easy to believe that if you're on your knees, it means you've lost. But let me remind you of something powerful. Your lowest point is never the end of the story. It's actually God's starting point. See, when you're standing tall, leaning on your own strength, you can start to believe you're in control. You can start to believe you've got it all handled. But when life drops you to your knees, suddenly your pride is stripped away. Suddenly you realize just how much you need him. And that's not weakness, that's clarity. That's the moment God steps in, not because you failed, but because you finally made space for him to move. There's something about being on your knees that shifts everything. The world sees it as defeat, but God sees it as surrender. And surrender is where his power begins to work. That's where miracles happen. That's where your story starts to shift. Because in your lowest place, you finally stop fighting in your own strength, and you start leaning on His. Think about it. So many stories in Scripture begin in the lowest place. Joseph was thrown in a pit. Daniel was dropped in a lion's den. Jonah was swallowed whole. And yet every single one of them discovered that the place that looked like the end was the very place God launched them into their purpose. If He did it for them, He'll do it for you. Maybe right now you're in that place. Maybe you've been praying, crying, wondering if God even hears you, and the silence feels unbearable. The struggle feels endless. But what if the silence isn't absence? What if the silence is preparation? What if God is waiting until you've reached the end of yourself so He can show you what He can do? When you're at rock bottom, there's only one direction left to go, and that's up. And when you rise, it's not on shaky legs of pride, it's on a foundation of faith. That's why your lowest point is so important, because when you rise from there, you don't rise the same. You rise with a deeper trust. You rise with a stronger faith. You rise with a story that no one can take away from you. I know some of you have looked at your situation and thought, this is it. I can't come back from this. But hear me clearly. God is not intimidated by your rock bottom. He does His best work in the places where we see no way out. He's not limited by what you've lost. He's not shaken by how far you've fallen. In fact, the very ground that feels like defeat is the soil where He plants the seed of your comeback. So don't despise your lowest point. Don't curse it. Don't assume it's the end, because the very place that broke you is the same place God will build you. And when He lifts you from your knees, you'll see that the ground you thought was your grave was really the foundation for your rise. Your lowest point is not your ending. It's God's starting point. Shame is one of the heaviest chains a person can carry. It creeps into your thoughts, whispers into your ear, and convinces you that because you fell, because you made mistakes, because you didn't measure up, you're not worthy of getting back up. And here's the dangerous part. Shame doesn't just point to what you did. It tries to tell you who you are. It takes a moment in your life and twists it into an identity, but that's a lie. That's not who you are. That's not who God says you are. Shame will say, you're not enough. You'll never be enough. Why even try again? And for many of us, that voice feels louder than anything else. But grace speaks a different language. Grace says, you don't have to be enough because I already am. You don't have to carry this because I already did. Grace doesn't ignore the fall, it redeems it. Grace doesn't pretend the mistake didn't happen. It takes the mistake and writes redemption right over the top of it. You see, guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. And that's why shame is so destructive. Because it keeps you from even believing you deserve to rise again. But here's the truth. God never called you to carry shame. That was never part of His design for your life. The cross was proof of that. He carried it all so you wouldn't have to. I want you to imagine for a moment, if God only wanted perfect people, if He only used the ones who never fell, there'd be no one left to rise. Every woman who ever did something great had a moment of falling short. The difference was not that they never made mistakes. The difference was they didn't let shame keep them down. They accepted grace, and that changed everything. Think about Peter. He denied Jesus 3 times. He swore he didn't even know Him. If anyone had reason to sit in shame, it was him. And yet grace found him. Grace restored him. And Peter went on to be the rock the church was built on. That's what grace does. It takes the very place of your failure and turns it into the foundation of your purpose. Some of you have been walking with shame for years. You've worn it like a cloak, hiding behind it, pretending you've moved on when deep down you've been carrying the weight of not enough. But here's what I want you to hear. You don't have to wear that anymore. You don't have to stay bound by what you did or what was done to you, because grace has already written a new name over your life, forgiven, redeemed, chosen, loved. The enemy will keep trying to drag you back with reminders of your past. But grace always speaks louder. Grace reminds you that your past may explain you, but it doesn't define you. Grace tells you that what happened then doesn't dictate what God can do now. Grace pulls you out of the pit that shame tried to bury you in. When you rise, it won't be because you earned it or deserved it. It'll be because you finally believed him when he said his grace was enough. And that's the most freeing realization you'll ever have, that you don't have to rise alone. You rise with him, you rise because of him, you rise covered in mercy that never runs out. So let shame say what it wants, let guilt try to replay the story, but let grace have the final word, because shame is the enemy and grace is always the answer. Strength doesn't come from the easy days. It's not built in the moments when everything is smooth, when the path is clear, and when the answers come quickly. Strength is born in the struggle. It's in the nights you cried yourself to sleep and still woke up the next morning. It's in the moments you felt like you had nothing left but somehow kept going. It's in the places where you thought the breaking would destroy you, but instead it shaped you. That's where real strength is formed. Every scar you carry is proof that you survived something meant to take you out. You might not see it that way when you're in the middle of it, but every struggle is chiseling something into you that comfort never could. Pain has a way of teaching lessons that ease will never teach, and though none of us want the struggle, it's the very thing that transforms us into who we were created to be. Think about a diamond. It starts as nothing more than a piece of coal. But it doesn't stay coal. It becomes something precious, something unbreakable, because of the pressure it endured. Without that pressure, it would never shine. And in the same way, the pressure you've faced, the battles you've walked through, the storms you've survived, they are shaping you into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone unshakable. The truth is, we often pray for strength, but we don't want the struggle that builds it. We want courage, but we don't want the battle that requires it. We want faith, but we don't want the test that stretches it. Yet strength, courage, and faith aren't handed out in comfort zones. They're forged in the fire of adversity. And if you've been walking through fire, maybe it's because God is preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. Sometimes the very things we beg God to take away are the things He's using to grow us. That heartbreak, it taught you resilience. That rejection, it taught you self-worth. That season of loneliness, it taught you to lean on Him instead of everyone else. None of it was wasted, not a single tear, not a single setback. Every part of your struggle is working together to build strength in you that nothing and no one can take away. And here's the beautiful part. When you rise after the struggle, you don't just rise stronger for yourself. You rise stronger for everyone who's watching you, for everyone who will one day need your story as proof that they can make it through too. Your scars will be someone else's roadmap. Your testimony will be someone else's survival guide. Your strength will inspire strength in others, so don't resent the struggle. Don't think it means God has abandoned you. If anything, it's proof that He's preparing you. The enemy wanted it to break you, but God is using it to build you. And one day, you'll look back and realize the very thing you thought was going to destroy you was the very thing that made you unshakable. Because in the end, strength isn't built in the easy seasons. Strength is built in the struggle. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is working against you. The doors you thought would open stay shut. The opportunities you thought were certain slip right through your fingers. The relationships you thought would last forever end in heartbreak. And in those moments, it's so easy to look at your circumstances and think, this must be the end. I must have missed it. Maybe I'm not meant to rise. But what if what looks like a setback is actually a setup? What if what feels like the end is simply the beginning of something greater that you can't see yet? Faith has a way of turning the story around. Faith says, even if I can't see the outcome, I trust the author. Faith reminds you that God's vision stretches farther than your pain, farther than your disappointment, farther than your confusion. And while you're staring at the closed door in front of you, He's already preparing the one that's going to change your life. I think sometimes we forget that God is not just interested in our comfort. He's interested in our calling, and sometimes the things we wanted most had to fall apart so the things He designed for us could come together. That rejection wasn't the end, it was redirection. That delay wasn't punishment, it was protection. That disappointment wasn't destruction, it was preparation. We've all had moments where we look back and realize the very thing we cried over, the very thing we begged God to let us keep, was the very thing that would have held us back if we stayed. And now, with time and perspective, you can see it. You can see how His hand was working even when you didn't understand it. That's the power of faith. It takes the pain of now and anchors it in the promise of what's next. The enemy wants you to believe your setback is permanent. He wants you to stop trying, stop hoping, stop believing, because if he can convince you to quit, then he wins. But if you choose to rise in faith, if you choose to say, I may not know how this ends, but I know who's in control, then you've already won. Because faith shifts the atmosphere. Faith invites God to take the very thing meant to break you and use it to build you. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison for something he didn't do. From the outside, his life looked like nothing but setback after setback. But all along, God was setting him up for something greater, because one day, that same Joseph who was thrown away would become second in command of an entire nation. And when the very people who hurt him needed help, he was the one who rose to save them. That's what faith does. It turns setbacks into setups. And maybe that's what God is doing in your life right now. Maybe the closed doors, the heartbreaks, the delays aren't signs that you're forgotten. They're signs that you're being prepared. Because when God opens the door He's preparing for you, you'll realize why all the others had to close. So don't curse the setback. Don't let it convince you you've lost. Trust that your story is bigger than this chapter. Trust that God is using every no, every delay, every disappointment to position you for the exact place He's called you to be. Because what looks like a setback in your eyes is often a divine setup in His. When you rise with God, it's never just about you. Yes, He lifts you. Yes, He strengthens you. Yes, He restores what was broken. But the impact goes far beyond your own life. Because every rise creates a ripple. Every comeback becomes a signal to the people around you that hope is still alive. You may not even realize it, but someone is always watching. Someone is always listening. Someone is always paying attention to how you handle your valleys and your victories. And the way you rise could be the exact inspiration someone else needs to rise too. We live in a world where so many people are quietly struggling, smiling on the outside, but barely holding it together on the inside. They don't always need a lecture. They don't always need a sermon. They need a living example of what it looks like to fall and rise again. And that's what you become when you choose to stand back up with God's strength. You become proof that healing is possible, proof that faith still works, proof that you don't have to stay down forever. And isn't that powerful, to know that your story could be the key to unlocking someone else's courage? That your scars could be the evidence they need to believe that their scars won't define them either. Rising with God is never just personal, it's generational. It's for your children who will see how you faced battles and learned to trust Him through them. It's for your friends who will draw strength from your resilience when they feel like quitting. It's for strangers you may never meet who will hear your testimony one day and realize they're not alone. Think about it. If you only ever rose for yourself, it would already be worth it. But God's design is bigger. He allows your rise to shine light for others. Your pain becomes a platform. Your testimony becomes a tool. And sometimes the greatest ministry you'll ever have isn't in what you say. It's in how you live, in how you rise. There's a reason people are inspired by those who have walked through fire and come out stronger. It's because deep down, we all want to believe we can do the same. And when you rise, you give others permission to believe they can too. You show them that brokenness doesn't have to be the final chapter, that grace is stronger than shame, that faith is stronger than fear. Don't underestimate the power of your story. Don't minimize what God has brought you through. You may think it's small, you may think it doesn't matter, but to someone else, it could mean everything. To someone else, your rise could be the reminder that they are not forgotten, that they are not finished, that their story is not over. And this is why rising with God matters so much, because it's not just about surviving. It's about showing others that they can too. It's about turning your scars into symbols of hope. It's about becoming living proof that God restores, redeems, and resurrects what life tried to bury. So when you rise, don't just rise for you. Rise for the women watching. Rise for the daughters coming after you. Rise for the broken hearts who need to see that it's possible, because your rise is bigger than you. Your rise is the light someone else has been praying to see.